Let's look at a high-level overview of single-layer perceptrons. A single-layer perceptron is a type of neuron having multiple inputs and one output. Input nodes are connected to a node in the next layer. The node in the next layer takes the weighted sum of all its inputs. It is called a single layer because it has one layer that contains one computational node. A computational node is just a place where computation happens, similar to a neuron in the human brain, which fires when it encounters sufficient information signals. Shown here is our certification exam question, this time with an additional variable, hours of sleep. Here, the artificial neuron accepts input data, the hours of sleep and the hours of study, and passes the data on to another artificial neuron. Here we have replaced our hours of sleep and hours of study with the features X1 and X2. Our X1 and X2 input data are fed forward into the input node, which then feeds forward the data into the perceptron's computational node. W1 and W2 represent the weights or how strong the signals are for X1 and X2. So a perceptron consists of four parts. One input layer, made of input neurons that take the initial data into the system for further processing. Weights. If the weight from node 1 is stronger than the weight from node 2, then node 1 has more influence on the output. And bias, which is an additional parameter whose job is to modify the output along with the weighted sum of the input to the other neuron. And net sum, which calculates the total sum, and the activation function. The activation function, also called the transfer function, calculates a weighted sum of hours of sleep and hours of study and their weights, and adds a bias with it to output a result. Let's look more into how a neuron processes its inputs. Neuron weights can be adjusted individually as it learns based on actual versus predicted output. The modified input signals are then summed up to a single value. This is where the bias is added. Note, all the neurons have random weights and random biases at the start. The next step is activation, where the result of the neuron's calculation is turned into an output signal. Let's summarize. The single-layer perceptron model is one of the simplest artificial neural networks. It consists of a feed-forward process and includes an activation function inside the model. A single-layer perceptron can learn only linearly separable patterns, meaning it can only analyze the linearly separable objects with binary outcomes, meaning 0 or 1, for example. The multi-layered perceptron model is similar to a single-layer perceptron model, but has more hidden layers. In the next video, we'll introduce the multi-layer perceptron.